Handmaid's Tale starting at 9 tonight. Don't miss them. First, a touch of reality. Rob has the news.
Tonight on 5 News, the Tory party leadership contest, and the winner is... there is no winner. Clark and Hague will go head-to-head on Thursday. The RUC arrests a man as Lurgan mourns the 2 murdered policemen. Blair takes the lead in Europe, but on a bicycle, not around the negotiating table. We'll also have all today's sports news, including a proud pride of Lions who prove they're ready to pounce on the Springbok. And as Wimbledon fortnight looms, is the British strawberry on the way out? But first tonight, Kenneth Clarke goes into the final round of the Conservative leadership battle on Thursday with his tail up. He was 2 votes ahead of William Hague in today's second round, with John Redwood 24 votes behind. And tonight, at the end of a fevered day at Westminster, it appears that some of Mr Redwood's supporters are doing the unthinkable for them and swinging behind Mr Clarke. Mark Easton reports.
Well, those bells indicate that the polls have now closed on round 2 of a political contest which all 3 candidates agree is about unifying the Conservative Party. But all the signs are that it's actually tearing it apart. Westminster was in full intrigue mode. All 164 Tory MPs had been in to vote, and when the result was announced out of view of the cameras, it was something of a surprise, and further proof that the fault line over Europe still runs slap bang down the middle of the Tory party.
The result of the second ballot of the leader of the Conservative Party is as follows. Kenneth Clarke, 64, William Hague, 62, John Redwood, 38.
So John Redwood has to drop out, and Kenneth Clarke defies the pundits by winning again, albeit by just 2 votes. He expressed himself delighted at the prospect now of a head-to-head showdown with William Hague on Thursday.
Well, so far I have got a 100% record of coming top in the ballot of every test of opinion that's been taken in the Conservative Party.
Mr Hague also seemed to be relishing the idea of delivering the knockout punch in 48 hours' time.
I think I now have the momentum and the support to win the 3rd ballot on Thursday. That is what I will set out to do.
But the question is, who will John Redwood supporters move to in that final round? Despite Mr Clarke's pro-European views, a number of Mr Redwood's Eurosceptic fans were hinting they would back the former Chancellor. As for Mr Redwood himself, now cast as kingmaker, he hasn't made up his mind yet.
And I've been telephoned, you'll be amazed to learn, by both Ken and William, the 2 remaining candidates in the field, and they want to put some points to me, and I will listen to both of them.
And during the past half hour at John Redwood's Westminster headquarters, supporters have been arriving for a last supper. On the menu, the future of the Conservative Party. Mark Easton, Westminster, 5 News.
And our political editor is still at Westminster. Mark, why would the anti-Europeans from John Redwood's camp ever want to back Ken Clarke, their arch-enemy?
Well, it does sound very unlikely, but I think the point here is that, that there are issues other than Europe, believe it or not, that the Tory party have to think about. And I think that that some of John Redwood's supporters, certainly people like Theresa Gorman even, are considering voting for Kenneth Clarke because they think that he's perhaps a big hitter as opposed to the man they now dub Hague the Vague.
So what happens between now and Thursday?
Well, as you saw in the film, people have been arriving at John Redwood's house, his supporters, for a supper, and I guess that John Redwood will be talking about what he thinks they should do in the final ballot. So I think a lot will depend on which way John Redwood suggests that they vote, and I think finally the ballot on Thursday will be decided probably by events over that dinner this evening.
Who'll win it, Mark?
I think it's too close to call, and that's a really difficult question to answer tonight, I can tell you.
OK, Mark, thank you very much indeed. More top stories on the move tonight. Yet another water company is awash with massive profits. Thames Water, which has the highest leakage rate of the privatised companies, made £184 million last year, an increase of 19%. The white South African supremacist leader Eugene Terreblanche is beginning a 6-year jail term for attempted murder. Terreblanche savagely beat a black worker for eating at work. The neo-Nazi plans to appeal against the conviction. Violent storms and flash floods have left 4 people dead in the French region of Normandy. The authorities have declared it a disaster area. Major roads throughout the area were cut off, and the forecasters predict more storms to come. Tony Blair really did put Britain first in Europe today, but it was in a bike race, not around the negotiating table. With leaders still trying to reach final agreement on all sorts of issues, the battle of the bikes provided a little bit of entertainment. Our diplomatic editor, Judy Aslett, is in Amsterdam. Judy, has anything serious been going on there?
Well, the meeting's actually still going on, but Tony Blair is pretty sure he'll get what he wants. The main stumbling block has been defence, where Britain is adamant that nothing should undermine NATO. Also, Mr Blair wants to put unemployment and jobs back to the top of Europe's priority list. Will he get what he wants? Well, he did win that bike race. While pushing for jobs to be top of the agenda, Tony Blair got on his bike and led the other European heads into lunch. The 7-speed Eurocycles were a gift from the Dutch to remind their European counterparts to be kind to the environment. Inside, the work continued with translators on hand even when the leaders were eating. It is, by all accounts, a cumbersome way of doing business, and Tony Blair wants the whole system to change. What Britain's proposing is that countries with a common interest get together in smaller groups. That way they could agree on a jobs policy, for instance, or maybe their own system for border controls, which would only commit those countries that signed up. The only thing the whole of Europe would have to agree on is where to hold the next summit. It should make the politics of Europe more relevant to the people, which will please demonstrators who say the summit means nothing to them. Mr Blair's confident Europe will follow his lead.
What has changed in the atmosphere here is that people are listening to an agenda we have, particularly the agenda on economic reform and jobs, and that is an important change in Britain's relations with Europe.
Tony B.R. King brought a smile for Mr Blair, if not the German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. If Britain does get a deal on defence too, the government can say this summit has been a success.
And Judy, I gather there is some late news on that defence deal.
Yes, NATO does feature prominently in the defence deal, so Britain's won that one.
Judy, apart from this being a bit of a jolly junket and them all having a bit of a laugh, does it really achieve anything?
Well, it's cost £10 million, and it was supposed to pave the way for the future of Europe in the next millennium, and in particular to allow other Eastern European countries to join, and it hasn't succeeded in that, so it has been a bit of a disappointment. But for Tony Blair, it's allowed him to feature prominently in Europe and to say that he wants future summits to discuss issues like animal rights and the environment. Now, the other European countries have listened favourably to that, so I think Tony Blair at least will go home happy.
Judy Aslett, thank you very much indeed. Now, Ascot has arrived, Wimbledon is just around the corner, and the traditional accompaniment is, of course, the Great British Strawberry. Sounds idyllic, doesn't it? But an environmental group has warned that foreign strawberries, often flown thousands of miles to Britain, are flooding our shops. Our consumer correspondent, Charlotte Hume, has been sampling and investigating the battle of the British strawberry.
Today, the British strawberry fought back. The environmental group known as SAFE showed off rare British varieties of this favourite fruit, but the strawberries on your supermarket shelves are more likely to have been flown from countries thousands of miles away, foreign imports that are flooding the British market.
Last year, over 1,000 tonnes of Californian strawberries came into the UK during the UK strawberry season. It's not just obviously the effects on UK growers, although we're concerned about that. We're concerned about the environmental effects of bringing strawberries halfway around the world or trucking them across Europe from Spain to reach our supermarkets. Those environmental effects are quite enormous.
Even though it might sometimes be cheaper for retailers to fly in fruit from abroad, one British supermarket has a policy of selling at least 95% British strawberries.
Not all companies do this, and there's quite a lot of imports and a growing level of imports from places like the States. I think what has to happen is customers have to ask for British strawberries. A bit of a get back to the Buy British campaign.
Even though there are plenty of British strawberry growers like this one in Middlesex, we're actually importing double the amount of strawberries than we did 10 years ago, and the figure's getting worse. In fact, next week, which is the peak of the British strawberry season, in time for Wimbledon, of course, we're actually going to find that the number of imported strawberries is at its highest. So the advice of the experts is, if you can't buy British strawberries from your local supermarket, simply go out and find somewhere to pick your own.
So if you're joining in the spirit of Wimbledon and also want to do your bit for the environment, messages Buy British and give the import a miss. Charlotte Hume, 5 News.
And we'll stay with strawberries for tonight's 5 facts. The Romans considered strawberries to be romantic, even an aphrodisiac. Strawberries were first grown commercially in Britain during the 18th century. We now grow more than 40,000 tonnes a year. During Wimbledon fortnight, they served 23 tonnes, that's about 1 million strawberries. During World War I, a law was passed forbidding fresh strawberries from being sold to the public unless they were picked and sold on a Saturday. The rest had to be used for jam. A quarter of a pound of strawberries provides the daily intake of vitamin C. Herbalists have recommended the fruit for kidney stones, liver inflammations, and to prevent fainting. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, more of the day's top stories, including news of that arrest in Northern Ireland. Plus, the Edgbaston residents who are driving out curb crawlers and prostitutes. But where are they going? And in sport, Gunners fans over the moon with Overmars, their new Dutch international. We'll also have the rest of the day's sports news. All of that coming up in just a few minutes.